The Russian army tried to block Ukrainian soldiers in Avdiivka and reportedly lost 34 tanks in the process. Russian forces in Ukraine are currently launching an attack with the aim of capturing Avdiivka. Avdiivka is a town located northwest of Donetsk, which is the headquarters of one of the pro-Russian separatist republics in eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. Last year, Russian forces spent several months attempting to remove the Ukrainian garrison from Avdiivka, but were unsuccessful. Now, with a break in Ukraine's 4-month-long counteroffensive, they are making another attempt. The situation isn't going well for the Russians. When they directly attack the well-prepared Ukrainian troops who are dug in, the Russian troops are facing the same tough lesson that the Ukrainians learned in the early weeks of the counteroffensive. Trying to attack enemy fortifications is tough and expensive, especially when the enemy's artillery is already aimed and their drones are keeping an eye on everything. There's a high chance that the attack will not succeed and will only make the retreating regiments and their positions weaker than they were before. Just one day after the Russian attack began on Tuesday, the area between Russian and Ukrainian positions, both north and south of Avdiivka, is filled with destroyed Russian vehicles and casualties among Russian infantry, both dead and wounded. Experts who independently track combat losses in Ukraine have swiftly assessed the magnitude of the disaster as Russian regiments entered Ukrainian artillery and missile kill zones. Analyst Andrew Perpetua has confirmed approximately 70 vehicle losses on the Russian side in the past 24 hours, compared to only around 15 on the Ukrainian side. Among the Russian losses, at least one of the 4 main tank types has been confirmed: T-62s, T-72s, T-80s, and T-90s. Interestingly, the only type missing from the losses is the 70-year-old T-54-55 tank. According to one Ukrainian source, it's estimated that the Russians lost a total of 34 tanks. It appears that the Russians have gathered around half a dozen motor rifle regiments and brigades for their two-sided attack on Avdiivka. With several thousand infantry and hundreds of tanks and fighting vehicles combined, the attackers outnumbered, on paper, the Ukrainian garrison in Avdiivka, which consisted of approximately 2 brigades. The Russians also have substantial air and artillery support. Russian Air Force Sukhoi Su-35 fighter bombers were reported to have bombarded Avdiivka. There were also reports of strikes by guided munitions, likely including the UPAVs and CAVs, that Ukrainian troops have described as among the most fearsome of Russia's weapons. Despite all the firepower at their disposal, the Russian forces didn't make much headway yesterday. This was largely because the Ukrainian brigades had spent months, even years, fortifying their positions. According to the Ukrainian General Staff's report on Wednesday, the Ukrainian defenders showed great courage in holding the line. They successfully repelled 10 enemy attacks near Avdiivka, and another 8 attacks in the areas east of Stepov and southeast of Syeverna, along the same front sector. There is currently a heated debate regarding whether the Russian armed forces in Ukraine still have significant operational reserves. These reserves refer to formations that haven't been deployed yet and still have most of their troops and vehicles available. The question is whether these reserves exist and whether they are not exhausted from months of continuous fighting. Even if the Russians indeed have plenty of troops in reserve, the unsuccessful assault on Avdiivka will likely deplete those reserves. The Kremlin will have to either restore or replace units that suffered heavy casualties in the attack, thus consuming valuable resources and manpower. However, it is premature for the Ukrainians to claim victory at this stage. It seems that the Russians' goal is to encircle Avdiivka without directly attacking the urban center of the settlement. By seizing control of the surrounding terrain, the Russians could potentially cut off the Ukrainian garrison, leading to a situation where they are deprived of essential supplies. The Russians might regroup and attempt another assault. As the sun rises in Ukraine on Wednesday, All attention is focused on the field surrounding the settlement, where the Russians will have their second opportunity to attack. Ukrainian journalist Yuri Butusov cautioned, "The situation is very serious." Russian forces suffered significant losses in the past 24 hours, according to the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine on Thursday. They reported that Russia lost a total of 1,130 soldiers, 20 tanks, and 33 artillery systems. With these recent casualties, the Ukrainian army stated that Russia has lost a total of 321,800 soldiers in the war so far, as reported by the state-owned Ukrinform agency. However, this number has not been independently confirmed. In September, a Russian media outlet critical of the Kremlin conducted an investigation and identified over 230,000 death certificate applications for soldiers who fell on the front line. Additionally, the armed forces in Kiev reported large-scale Russian attacks on Kupiansk, northeast, Marinka, and Avdiivka, east, the previous day. Meanwhile, Ukraine has continued its offensive in the southeastern province of Zaporizhia, aiming to advance toward the occupied city of Melitopol, and has been holding its ground in the final stretch of the Dnieper River, in the southern province of Dnipro. In the past 24 hours, Ukraine claims to have launched 11 attacks on troop buildups at different points along the front line.